for us. The first question is this. What qualities do you look for in a leader? So if you could answer that question and then also tag in where you're viewing us from today. So the city, state, the country, wherever you're calling in from, if you can share that. So question one will be, what qualities, if you could list one quality, name one quality that you look for in a leader, in an effective leader, and then just the location that you are calling in from. And I love it. We already have some responses. We're going to share some of these throughout the session today. So I see honesty and openness, integrity, servant leadership. We have someone from Atlanta, Georgia, also from Orlando. Hello, Emily from Philadelphia as well. Dan is in Boulder, Colorado, but we'll introduce him in just a moment. Let's see, Orlando, Charleston, South Carolina, welcome. Mindfulness, empathy, and mentorship, and trust and believe as well. Sincere feedback, and that's something that we'll talk today too. Perfect. So keep those coming in. If you'd like to do that, just do your introductions. Hello from Chicago. Hi, Mindy. It's good to see you. And then we have Jacqueline from Hilton Head. She said compassion. And Jake, I'll share one more, makes everyone feel important, but also empowered as well. He's calling in from South Florida, and reliability too. So what we'll do is, while you all continue to submit those in, first off, I just want to thank you all for being part of our third installment of our Professionals Care series. Professionals Care, or CARE stands for Career Advancement Resource Events. And this was kind of the handiwork of 4 other individuals who have been absolutely amazing in helping on the back end of today's project as well. I'm going to give them props towards the end of today's session. But as part of this project too, we had the opportunity to partner with the Peer Outreach Mentoring Program at University of Central Florida, Rhodes College of Hospitality Management. So we do have some participants from that program participating in today's session. The POMP program is an award-winning, nationally recognized program, and it's led by Vanessa Blackman, who is the Assistant Director of Student Services there at Rhodes College of Hospitality Management. I don't know if she's on today, but we always give props and kudos to Vanessa for allowing us to reach out to her students as well. Now, before we begin today's session, what I'd like to do is to go over a few housekeeping items before we introduce our guest speaker today. First off, today's session will be recorded, and following our session, that recording will be made available for you to view at your leisure whenever you'd like to, and we'll provide information to you in a follow-up email over the next day or so. Second, we do encourage participation, and we encourage you to ask questions. As a matter of fact, you're going to get the opportunity to present your questions directly to today's guest speaker. He has also assured me that nothing is off the table for today's session, so don't hold back with your questions. One way that you actually can submit your questions for today's session is through the Zoom group chat. So if you hear something that kind of sticks out to you during the session, go ahead and type that question in the chat. One of our 3 co-hosts helping with today's session will see that question, but you will need to be on the lookout for a Zoom message notification. So you'll receive a direct message from one of our 3 co-hosts asking if you would like to come on screen and present your question to our guest speaker. If you would like to do so, what we're going to ask is that you turn on your camera and then also turn on your audio as well, your microphone, and then you'll be able to speak directly with our guest speaker today. Now, we know that some of you may not want to come on camera, and that's okay too. If you choose not to come on camera, that is fine. Just simply let one of our guest hosts or co-hosts know. And what they'll do is let me know, and I will ask that question on your behalf as well. So that is it for our housekeeping items. I want to take a moment now to introduce our guest speaker today. I am very honored, first off, to have this individual with us. Dan Cockerell he spent 26 years working at Walt Disney World and for the Walt Disney Company in a variety of leadership roles. He started out actually working in a variety of various management roles within Disney's parks and then also resort hotels. But then he also held a variety of executive leadership positions within Disney's parks and resorts. As a matter of fact, most notably, at the end or towards the last 9 years of his time at Walt Disney World, he served as the vice president of Epcot, Disney's Hollywood Studios, and the most attended and most popular theme park in the world, the Magic Kingdom Park. Dan retired from the Walt Disney Company in 2018, and he now leads his own consulting firm called the Cockerell Consulting Group, where he serves as a keynote speaker, also an executive coach, but then an author of a new book, which will soon be released, called How is the Weather in, or How's the Culture in Your Kingdom? So I just wanted to take a moment and say, Dan, thank you so much for being part of our session, and how are you today?
I'm great, Brandon, and I want to congratulate you all for putting this together. I've been doing, some podcasts during the quarantine called Lemons to Lemonade, and I've just been challenging people that in times like this, there's two kinds of people. There's people that lay down on the couch and wait till it's over and complain and worry, and there are those that get up and start doing stuff, and they just do stuff. They do make forward progress and forward momentum, and I think that's what y'all are doing with this series. And I think it's just fantastic, take the opportunity for whatever you have in front of you and make it happen and create value. And when you come out of this, things will be even better. So I just want to give you a little shout out for that. I think this is awesome. You're taking this initiative.
And thank you so much. We're honestly humbled by your words. And for this whole project, that's really where we came up with the acronym CARE, because all of the individuals as part of the group truly cared, and we wanted to find a way to give back. So I appreciate that. Dan, I know I introduced you, but I honestly think that many of the people here, they either know your background, your story, but your Disney story is actually very interesting, because I know that you've talked this in one of your previous podcasts. Your father, Lee Cockerell, actually served as an executive at Walt Disney World for a number of years as well. Yep. But your story of how you started at Disney was different from his. So could you just take a moment, just share the Dan Cockerell story with us and tell us how you started at Disney and kind of your Disney career?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the hospitality industry. My dad was with Marriott for many years. He worked for Hilton, and he joined Disney back in 1990 for the Euro Disney project. So, growing up, he was always working on holidays, and I was, when I think I was 6 years old, I knew how to order room service. I figured out when they bring the thing, you just sign the check, and I'm sure they added the tip afterwards. I couldn't do math by then, but I knew you could get an ice cream sundae by calling that number. And so finally, when I went to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I ended up studying political science at Boston University. And each summer I worked somewhere else. I waited tables. I worked in a bank, Shearson Lehman Investments, which is now out of business. I worked at Disney on the college program. And when I graduated, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I called Disney and said, hey, I'm done with college, and do you have jobs? And they ended up hiring me. And when you have a political science degree and you don't want to become a lawyer or get into politics, I found out you're qualified to park cars. So my first full-time job at Disney was parking cars at Epcot. And I did that for 6 months. And I'd gotten a visa through BU to work internationally. And so I used my visa to be able to go over to France. And this was back in 1991. I left on January 1st, 92. And we opened the park over there 3 months later. So I went over there, once again, parking, because that's what I knew how to do. And I was a management trainee in the parking lot at Euro Disney, what we called it at the time. And then from there, it basically, between that job and me leaving Disney in 2018, I had 19 different jobs in between. I spent 5 years in France as a frontline manager, and just about every year I moved to a different job. And then came back to the United States in 97, and then spent the next 19 years working at Walt Disney World. Worked at Epcot for a while as an operations manager. I went into hotels for 6 years. And then I came back out and went to Magic Kingdom for 3 years. And then I had my first vice president role at Epcot. And then, as you mentioned earlier, went to Hollywood Studios, Magic Kingdom. And then in 2017, my wife and I started talking about making a change. And we have 3 kids, and we knew the last one was going to be headed off to college. So it took us a year, one of the most terrifying decisions of my life, to leave Disney. But I've always been a big fan of diverse experience, seeing things, taking risks, seeing new things. And, it felt like my time at Disney, 26 years, 19 jobs. I'm like, all right, this has been a great run, but let's go do something else now. And I would call it a calculated risk, because leaving Disney and going to open your own company is, like I said, pretty scary. And the past 2 years, my wife and I are running this company now. And, we feel every day is a learning experience. I'm learning marketing now. I'm learning sales. I'm learning digital media. I mean, every day is a new learning experience. Just the difference this time is we have some money in our pocket, and we're a lot wiser than we were, 25 years ago when I left college. So that's been our run.
Excellent. Can you tell us more about your book as well? So I know that your book is released, I believe, in August.
Right.
Can you tell us more about just the book in general? What does it talk about when it comes to leadership?
Yeah, sure. And I'll give you a little background on the book. When I left, I knew that if you're going to go in, become a keynote speaker and have a consulting company, having a book just gives you a heck of a lot of credibility. Ironically, my speeches haven't changed and what I teach hasn't changed. But when you have a book, and someone told me the other day, they said, hey, just don't keep in mind the word author and the word authority have the same root into it. You're an authority on what you're talking about. And it's a great way to consolidate your thoughts. And so I put a bunch of stuff down on a piece of paper when I left Disney. I just said, okay, what do I know? I'm trying to figure out what I know. What can I share with people? And I made a gigantic list, and I put descriptions. I know how to collaborate. I know how to communicate. I know strategic planning. I know how to handle stress. And I wrote this up, and I sent it off to a professor at Rollins College, Keenan Yoho. And I said, Keenan, I don't know what I have here, but I have a bunch of stuff. Can you look at it? And I didn't even know what to expect. I didn't even know what I was asking him to do. And 24 hours later, he sent it back to me. He said, Dan, I see 3 topics here. Lead yourself, lead your team, lead your organization, and I've aligned them for you. And that was it. That's how our company formed. That's how we teach our workshops, my book. And so the book basically, the whole first section is on leading yourself. I'm a huge advocate of self-care. A lot of people, when you talk about it, people say, well, tell me, I know that, Dan, is that all you got? And I say, well, look, you know that, but then why don't you get enough sleep? And why don't you eat right? And why don't you drink enough water? And why don't you exercise enough? And why don't you know how to manage stress? And why aren't you more organized? So these are all the things that we can advantage ourselves. If we take care of ourselves, we're in a much better position to take care of our families, take care of our professional responsibilities. So I go into that. The second part of the book is leading your team, leading people. I know in leadership, a lot of times when you go from a frontline role to leading people, it's a whole different skill set. You're not just counting on your own performance anymore. You're trying to influence others' performance, and it's a big jump. The next section of the book is on leading organization, and that's more around the traditional parts of, I think, running a company. Communication, collaboration, creativity, innovation. And then the fourth part of the book we added was on leading change. And we thought it was important to include that because it's just such a big theme today. Things are changing so rapidly. And so I really wanted to focus on giving people some tips on how you handle change, whether you're causing the change or you're on the receiving end of the change, some things to keep in mind. And every chapter has a story in it. Every chapter talks about the concept, and every chapter has a section at the end called Fast Track to Results, which basically gives people very specific behavioral tactics they can implement immediately if they want to get better at a certain area. I'm big on inspiration, and I'm big on the philosophical side of leadership, but I realized it's about behaviors. You got to do stuff every day. That's what talks. As they say, the action talks, and talk is just talk. And so you really got to learn how to, that's what your reputation's based on. And it's what the culture of your company is based on, is your behaviors, what you actually do, how you handle situations. And so that's the book in a nutshell.
Excellent. How about storytelling? So storytelling, of course, is the key to everything that we do at Disney. We talk about that the culture of the organization falls on telling stories. How are you able to apply storytelling as part of your leadership style?
Yeah, well, it's something you can practice. You know, some people say, well, I'm not really a good storyteller. And it's like, well, figure it out. Or, you know, I'm not a good public speaker. Go practice and figure that out. I'm not good at math. Practice. So you can be good at anything you want. I remember talking to someone once, and I said, you know, I would love to play the guitar, but I'm just not a musician. You know, I just don't have it. They said, well, that's a nice little cop-out excuse. But if you got a guitar, you practiced, you'd be able to play. You probably wouldn't be, you know, world class, but you could probably get there if you decided to focus on it. It was important to you. So you really can do whatever you want to do. And so I think when you start think about storytelling, storytelling is a way to connect with people on an emotional level. You know, I can tell you to treat children and make them feel special and treat them as individuals and send you out. Or I can tell you a story about the little girl who came in and celebrating her birthday, and the fact that this cast member had a conversation with her and found out that she didn't have enough money to buy a present, and listen to that and then create this magical moment. And all of a sudden I've taught people how to pay attention, how to connect with children, how to be empowered to create moments for people. And just that role modeling. And that's what storytelling is. It's role modeling. It's not role modeling yourself, but it's telling a story, and you're finding someone you can emulate. And when you can copy someone else's behaviors, that's one of the best ways to learn. And I think that's what storyteller brings. And by the way, people remember stories too. They don't remember lists, but they remember stories, because stories connect with you on an emotional level. And if you can become a storyteller, you can influence anyone to do anything. And you know, that can be good or bad, but that influence is there because people connect with story.
And I agree with you. And storytelling, you know, it not only applies to what you're currently doing. One thing that I firmly believe is that when you're going through the interview process for a job, you're telling stories as part of that too. A lot of interviews now are behavioral based questions. And one thing I've always encouraged people to do is to start building your collection, almost like a book of stories that you can fall upon and rely upon to share your experience along the way too. So that's perfect.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. So you started out at Disney on the front lines, and I think that's kind of an important step. I'll be honest, I talk to a lot of people who often wonder, how do you get your foot in the door at Disney? How do you start at Disney?
Yeah.
When you think back to your first role working in parking, why was that so relevant and so important when it comes to your leadership story?
Sure. Well, I think the big relevancy at the time was I didn't know how to do anything else. You know, I'd had some leadership experience playing sports, but I'd never led people in a business environment. So I had no business getting hired to be a manager. So I just wanted to get my foot in the door so I could learn. And I think it's such a benefit to get in at a frontline level and understand the business. Now, if you come out of college and you join a consulting company and you never have that opportunity, it doesn't mean you'll never get to do that. The next time, if you ever get in a leadership role, and we do that at Disney all the time, when a new leader comes in, they usually will spend time and get trained on how to operate the attraction, or how to operate the restaurant, or how to work in the merchandise location, work the register, how to check guests in. And, I think a lot of companies say, well, once you get to a certain level of leadership, you paid your dues, and that's not your job anymore. You shouldn't worry about that. You have to worry about bigger things. But the reality is, where the service and the quality and the value is delivered in companies is at the frontline level. When I call Southwest Airlines to change a reservation or get a credit back or deal with something, I'm not talking to the CEO. I'm talking to someone at their call center. And if the person at the call center isn't accurate at how they do their job, and they don't have a great attitude, or they don't have the competency to help me, then I'm going to go to another airline. And it has nothing to do with the CEO. It has everything to do with the employee I interact with. So by working at the front line and learning how hard the job is, learning how much these people need the right tools, the right training, the right environment, when you get to the next level where you have the ability to influence and have the authority to make a great environment, you're very empathetic to those jobs because you are in their shoes. And I remember like yesterday being out in the parking lot at Epcot, parking cars. And I remember asking myself sometimes, well, I wonder why the managers are never out here. They must be in some really important meetings. And then finally, when I became a frontline manager, I'm like, where were they? There were no big important meetings every day. They just weren't out with us. And so then you start to really empathize and you learn the business along the way. And the experiences you get, they pay off a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, they pay off. They seldomly pay off right away, but the experience is you just keep collecting these experiences. And as you
Yeah.
collect more and more experiences, you just get better and better at handling situations. You're able to handle them more easily because you've been there before. You've been under that pressure before. You've seen what those are, and you make much better decisions.
And I agree with you. And honestly, in my time working at Disney, some of the best and greatest leaders I've worked for Disney worked in the front lines at some point. They were out in the parks, but they were able to gain that experience and be able to apply that to their leadership as they continue to grow their career as well. Perfect. Thank you, Dan. So I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to ask you more questions along the way, but we're getting some questions that are coming in already.
Good.
So I would love to open the floor to our participants to ask questions at this point. So our first question actually will come from Blake. Blake, we love. This is his third session that he's been to. So, and we normally I think it will become a tradition at some point. We'll let Blake start the questioning because every time we've allowed him to start the questioning. So, all right. Blake, are you with us right now?
Yes, sir, Mr. Rhodes. I am here. Mr. Cockerell, it's an honor to have you here, sir.
Hey, Blake, how are you?
I'm amazing, sir. How are you?
Good. So what do you got?
Yes, sir. So if you can go I know it's kind of a cheesy question, but if you could go back in time and give one piece of advice to yourself after you graduated college, what would it be?
Wow. Probably I wouldn't give myself advice after college because I look back on kind of what I did and, just to be able to work in 19 different roles in 26 years in a company like Disney, for me, I can't imagine one thing I would have done differently. And it's hard to say what you do differently because every time you make a decision, you create a new path that takes your life in another direction. I probably would have told myself in my freshman year of college, you have an opportunity and you have time to learn a lot. Take advantage of this time and suck it all in because I was not a great student. I got through my classes. I did just enough to pass. I played sports. I learned a lot socially there. But now that I'm past that, even the past 2 years, having time now to read and just learn. And, between 1991, when I was in college, there really wasn't an internet to go onto. You didn't have an iPhone. You didn't have all the stuff in your pocket. And today to think about any question you have about anything in the world is literally at your fingertips. I never take this for granted because it is just amazing what you can teach yourself anything if you're interested and you're curious. But if you don't ask the question, you're not curious, you're never going to get that answer. So I think I would have gone back and just said, you know what, whether it's college or even working, take advantage of every single day to learn something and just keep building your knowledge base and building your experience base because A, it makes life more exciting, and B, it makes you just so much more able to connect with different cultures and different experiences when you're always in that mode. And it's easy to not do that because it takes energy to do that. It takes risks to do that, to put yourself in new situations. But it is for me, it's one of the keys to success. And actually there's a book I'll recommend called Range. And it talks about how important being a generalist in a very specific world is. And so it's not to say you shouldn't have specific skills because you have to have skills to get a job, but just being able to be curious of things outside your realm of interest and just learning about things that you think have no impact on you, it just helps you apply new ideas to problems you may have in the future.
Mr. Cockerell, that's the best answer I could have ever asked for that. And right. If you mind me asking, do you know who is the author of the Range book?
I can't remember, but you got an iPhone?
I have my computer next to me. I'm sure I could Google search. Perfect. I'm taking notes down right now.
I can't remember, but yeah, Range is called, and it's like you said, it's important to be a generalist in a specialist world. I think it's called something like that.
Okay, Mr. Cockerell, thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Blake.
Blake, thank you again. Thank you for your question. It's always a pleasure to have you with us today. I am going to open the floor again to another question. Actually, we have Laura. Laura, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Excellent. I'm going to give you the floor and you can present your question to Dan.
Thank you. Hi, Dan. It's nice meeting you.
Yeah.
I had a question with regards to leading others. How important would you say that it is to take care of your employees so that they will take care of you and your company?
Yeah. So there's a concept I learned when I was working at Disney, and Disney didn't create this concept, but we use it now very heavily when we're working with consulting with other companies, and we call it it's called the value chain. Some people call it the chain of excellence, and it basically has 4 steps to it. And I'm going to work backwards. So at the end of the chain is creating value, creating sustained success. For many companies, that's making a profit. For nonprofits, it's generating enough resources so you can, attain your mission. But you need sustained results, and in order to get sustained results, your customers have to have excellent experiences. Because if they have excellent experiences, they're more likely to recommend you, and they're more likely to return. And that's sort of the holy grail at Walt Disney World: intent to return and intent to recommend. We measure those so closely because there's not enough people in the world to only come to Walt Disney World once. We need you coming back again and again. And the fact that we can market you to come once, but once you come and experience it, that's the best marketing there is, because now you have the personal experience, and now you're going to recommend us. You're going to tell your friends and family about it. You're going to come back because we offered you value. Well, who delivers that value? Your employees do. Your employees create the experiences for the guests that have them rate a high experience and come back again. That gives you the business results. And the step before that is leadership. And leadership has to create the right environment, the right culture for the employees to operate in, so they can deliver great service, so the guest has a great experience and recommends and comes back again, and you have sustained success. So there is no, you can't cut the chain and start at the guest, or start at the cast member, or start at the results. It all starts with leadership to the employees, to the customers or guests, to the results. And that's how we teach companies to operate. And the companies that get that, they are very successful, because they don't try to short circuit that. They don't go for just the money grab. They don't just focus on the guests and don't care about the culture of their employees, because that's not a sustainable model. And it starts with leadership.
Thank you.
Sure. Can't hear you, Brandon.
Here we go. I'm unmuted. There we go. Hey guys, sorry about that. So Laura, thank you so much for your question. We have plenty of questions to go as well. What I do want to let you all know, because we have so many questions, we're allotted to an hour time frame. If we do not get to your question today, I promise you that we're going to follow up with an answer to that question. So we want to make sure that we have the greatest impact on everyone here. So if you do have a question we do not get to today, we will follow up on an answer for you as well. Make sure we do that. I would like to turn the camera over to Mindy Williamson. Mindy, are you there?
Mindy, I know Mindy.
Ah!
Hi, how are you?
How you doing?
I want to just show you the book that I'm going to be
Yes.
working on here.
All right, that's a
very
good
soon. So thank you, Dan Cockerell,
story.
for that book. I'm in a position at my company, my organization, where I'm not at even a mid-level manager level position. And yet I want to take initiative, and I want to present ideas, and I want to, show that I can do more than what I'm currently doing. But I'm always concerned about whether that's appropriate. And I think about the need to kind of stay in my place, stay in my lane, that it might not be appreciated by management if I do take initiative outside of my position.
Right.
in a way that might, be seen as leadership. So I know that's a really fine line.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me an idea of how you would advise an employee who struggles with that?
Yes, sure. That is a great point, and I will call it one of the concepts I often talk about during these Q&As is the difference between problems and dilemmas. And problems have solutions. 1 + 1 is 2. That's a problem and a solution. The thing is, most of the things that are most important in our careers and our lives are not problems. They are dilemmas. They have no solution. They can only be managed. And so there's not a direct answer to them. But I can tell you, because this is a dilemma I think a lot of people have, is I have more to offer. I want to do more. I don't have the authority necessarily to do more. And I don't want to, I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I also want to, take initiative. And so I have a couple of answers, I think, or just some things to think about. And ironically, I'm in Boulder, Colorado right now. My wife and I drove from Orlando last week to visit our daughter. She just graduated from University of Colorado in Boulder, and she's on the job market, applying for tons of jobs. And she's working with us also because we have a lot going on. And we're writing right now a college management 101 course that we're developing. We're developing the content, the curriculum, the syllabus, the exam questions, the quizzes, the videos, and we're going to be selling that to colleges. We're going to see how that goes. So she's been our expert on this. And one of the things she told us was not just doing the management classes, but giving real life advice. Like, how do I run a meeting? Or how do I build an action plan? Or how do I build a communication plan? The things you don't necessarily learn in college, but you end up having to do in the real world. And one of the things she said would be very helpful is when I get into a new job, how do I know how soon I can start to make decisions on my own versus asking my boss about these things? And here's what happens in most jobs. The boss is so busy, they don't take the time to sit down with a new employee and explain to them what their expectations are. And I even tell you, most people don't even know what their expectations are. All they know is, I'm trying to keep my head above water. You're a new person here. Figure it out. Start helping me. But they don't tell you that. And so they want help. They want people to take initiative. They don't know what to ask people to do because they don't have to take the time to think about it. Then you have the new employee. And the new employee says, wow, I have a job now. I'm going to be a great soldier. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to wait to be told what to do. And once they tell me what I need to do, I'm going to do it really, really well. Mm-hmm. And so the employee sits around for 6 months and waits for orders. The boss sits around running around trying to get things done. And after 6 months is over, the leader says to the employee, you're doing okay, but you're not taking initiative. I like you to be more proactive. And you just lost 6 months. It's like, why couldn't you told me that on day one? And I would have really put myself out there and tried new things. So what I would tell you is go talk to your boss or whoever you want to talk to and say, look, I think I have more to offer. I have ideas, and I want you to help vet them with me. And I want to, serve them up to you. And whether your boss is the one that presents them or they give you the opportunity to present them, don't get hung up on that. If you have a good leader, they're going to share the credit. And if you don't, you're still going to get great experience. And if they tell you to stay in your lane and just do your job and don't worry about it, then I would start looking for a new job, because you want to be in an environment where you're getting the opportunity to express yourself and be able to get experiences faster. And there's a lot of companies like that now that want you to do that. Mm-hmm. But you might have a boss that's intimidated because you're smarter than they are, or you have better ideas than they do, or they just don't have time to deal with this. Short term, you can always work for someone like that, but long term, get the experience, and then you don't have to leave on bad terms, but just go move on and go do something else. And your whole career, you're going to have leaders who are going to be like life changers for you. And you're going to have other ones that are neutral. They're going to be not memorable. And you're going to have a few that are not going to be great. But every experience is great because you're going to learn what the great ones do, what the mediocre ones do, and what the bad ones do. And it's going to help you develop along the way. But personally, I always wanted my team to take more initiative. I'd rather get them out of a mess because they were being too proactive than having to put a fire under them. Because that proactivity, that positive, proactive attitude is such a valuable thing when you're in a job. You want a team like that. And some leaders forget to encourage their people to do that. Don't wait around and wait for them to tell them. Tee it up to your leader, tell them what your intentions are. And if they're neutral, go. And if they're positive, go. And if they tell you specifically they want you to do that, keep working. And like I said, start looking around.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Mindy, thank you so much for your question as well. The next question, actually, I will ask on behalf of this participant. It is Toshia McGoldrick. Toshia wanted to know, what was one of the most difficult situations you had to deal with as an executive, and how did you handle that situation?
Yeah, so I've had this question before, and I'm challenged to think of one. I have many. So I don't have one specific. I mean, I can give you a lot of specific ones, but I think just generally, as you move up in an organization, you're more and more visible. The decisions you make, the things you say are repeated. You just have to be much more aware of how you handle things, how you follow the rules or don't follow the rules, how you treat people. And in hindsight, the hardest things I had to deal with were just making mistakes and being on and for everyone to see. We had, I remember one of the ones, and I think I put this in my book. We ran a big event at Hollywood Studios when I was there, and it was the Villains party, and we did one of them. And my learning after that was, we said we're gonna have 50 villains. That seems like a lot of villains until like 10,000 people show up at the party. It doesn't sound like that many villains anymore. And it was a disaster. And afterwards, you got to take responsibility, and you can't look at industrial engineering or your GM and say, why did this happen? You should have been asking the questions, or I should have been asking the questions. I should have known, I should have seen, did we block people out or not? And so coming out of that, coming in on Monday morning, knowing that you were responsible for something that just didn't work out, and it could have if you had been more thoughtful or you'd asked more people to get involved. Experience is valuable, but boy, getting experience, sometimes you have to go and make some mistakes. So I think the hardest thing I've had to do is learn to make mistakes and then forgive myself and come in the next day and go right back at it again. And what most of us like to do is carry that guilt or shame around with us for a while, because I don't know if it makes us feel better, but it doesn't seem right to let it go. And in my mind, as long as you've learned something, you let it go and you move on, and you come back the next day with a great attitude again, you go right back at it. And if people tell you, well, you should feel bad about it, you're like, don't worry, I feel bad, but I can't change the past, but I can certainly learn from the past and move on. And that's the difference between professional golfers. The difference between an amateur golfer and a pro golfer is, I think, like 2.5 strokes. And the things that professional golfers have that amateurs don't, when they make a bad shot, they're able to instantaneously learn from it, put it out of their minds, and take the next shot with the last shot having no impact on the last thing they did. And it's hard to do that. But I think that's one of the hardest things I had to learn over time is, if you're going to get in the middle of the fray in operations or in a big company, you are going to make mistakes. And you got to be ready to take responsibility, let your ego go, absorb it. They'll take a little bite out of your butt, and you'll just kind of pat it down and move on and learn from that. So I think that's probably the biggest learning I've had.
Perfect. Toshia, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. We have Jennifer Kuziak. No, Jennifer, are you there? If not, I'll ask the question on your behalf. We'll try one more time.
Where are you, Jennifer? Come on.
Jennifer, are you there? All right.
It's all you, Brandon.
Well, I will ask this question. So Jennifer wanted to know, first off, hi, Jennifer. It's great to see you here. First, Jennifer wanted to know, what traits or skills do you value most in entry-level leaders that are representing you?
So what I see often, and I see this at all levels, I see it front entry-level managers, I see it at operations directors, I see it at vice presidents, is they come in and the first thing they want to do, they have this, not a chip on their shoulder, but there's this lack of confidence, and they want to make sure people understand why they got that job. And they're there to sort of prove themselves, and they want to have the answers, and they don't want to be vulnerable. And I always told, when I was an operations manager and I had entry-level managers I hired, I said, look, I just want to be clear with you. You deserve this job. If you didn't deserve it, we wouldn't have hired you for it. and you have nothing to prove, I assume you're going to be really successful at this job because we're really good at selecting people, and that your interview, your experiences, the talent we've recognized in you is going to make you really successful. So you don't have to prove anything to me. All you have to do is make sure you go out and you learn as much as you can about the people you're going to be leading, because you're only going to have a very specific amount of time to make a first impression and build a relationship with these people. And after that, you're now have your reputation. And people are not going to walk around in 6 months from now saying, boy, they're really good at their job. They really know a lot. People don't care about that because they've been doing this job much longer than you have. They're going to want to say, that person really respects us. They're willing to learn from us and ask questions, and they have some confidence to run the operation, but they also have the humility to let their barriers down and let us teach them. And it's a natural reaction, because when we're in a new role, we're nervous. We don't want to make mistakes. And sometimes we try to, represent ourselves as being totally confident. Now, you do need to have confidence and credibility as a leader. You don't want to walk around and just say, I'm never going to be able to do this job. Is that authentic enough? It's like, well, that's probably going a little bit too far. You're here to run a job, but don't try to impress your team. Don't try to talk about it's all about them. And the more you can do that, the faster you can do that, the better it is. Sometimes I tell people, look, they know you're the manager. You don't have to remind them that. They know who you are. All they want to know is their life going to get better or worse with you around? And if it's going to get better, they're going to do their jobs better. The guest is going to have a better experience. We're going to get business results, and you're going to get the credit for that. So that's probably one of the big things I tell leaders when they're coming in. Be open-minded, be curious, be humble, and you'll do great.
Dan, just to tack on to that as well, just, one of the important qualities I feel that a leader should possess is the ability to give feedback, but then also receive feedback. Yeah. I know in one of your earlier podcasts, you talk about feedback, because a lot of leaders, they struggle, or they find giving feedback, it's uncomfortable to them. They just don't know how to do it sometimes, and they don't want to approach that situation. So before I head into the next question, can you briefly just talk about feedback? Why is it important, one, that a leader be able to give feedback, but then two, what are some brief tips that you can give to someone who isn't necessarily comfortable with giving feedback?
Yeah. Well, you're talking to someone who struggled with this for a long time, because I'm a pretty positive guy. I like consensus. I like to manage through positivity and create a real positive environment. So for me, feedback was always uncomfortable. But I got to a point in my career where I realized a few things. One is, if I don't provide feedback to people, I'm not doing my job. And if I don't do my job, I'm not going to have a job. I'm not going to have other opportunities. And if I don't have more opportunities, I can't support my family. I can't, manage my career. And so pretty quickly it became evident, Dan, get over being uncomfortable, because this is something you just have to do. Now, the next thing I realized, and when it came to it, is I got really, really good at setting clear expectations, because a lot of times when feedback gets messy, it's because I didn't give you clear expectations. You did something outside of what I expected. Then I tell you about it, and you're looking at me like, well, we've never talked about this, and now you're coaching me. So a lot of times we put it on ourselves by not having clarity about what we want people to do and how we want them to do their jobs, and what ASAP means, and what being hospitable means. As a leader, you better be able to define those behaviors for people. Otherwise, you can't really coach them and say they're not doing it if you never told them what you expected them to do very specifically. And now the last piece of this is, when it is time to give feedback, you have to make sure, what was the behavior you observed that you're coaching this person on? I've heard before, you don't have a good attitude. I don't know what that means. Now I know what make a sarcastic comment sounds like, and I know what being rude to a guest sounds like, and I know I can describe those, but I can't tell you have a bad attitude, because that's just a feeling. I have to tell you, what was it I observed that I need you to change? How do I need you to change it? What does it look like in the future? And did it land? Do you understand what I told you? And if you can do those things, then you've done your job as a leader. I think a lot of leaders get so concerned about, is this person going to listen to me and actually change? You can't, you're not responsible for that. They have to choose to change. You can't make them change. All you can do is provide the feedback. Now the ball's in their court. And a lot of leaders want to take responsibility for them not changing. and then start to motivate them and start to do all these other things. That's in their court. That's not up to you as a leader to try to get them motivated to change. If they change, you congratulate them and reinforce it. And if they don't, then you move to the next step of coaching them. And if they don't, you move to the next step of giving them a written reprimand. And you just keep going until they either change or they move out of the organization. Because if you don't do that, then you're not doing your job. Lastly, as a leader, if you do not give people feedback, they are not going to change. And the next time they go into their next job and they make mistakes and they didn't know they were doing something wrong because you didn't have the courage to tell them that, now you're damaging their career. And so this is, it's kind of like raising kids. Our kids never liked it when we coached them or when they got in trouble or we told them something. But now that they're grown up, they're like, thank you for telling us those things, because now it helps us deal with the real world. You're never going to get thanked by giving someone feedback short term, but long term, they're always going to come back and appreciate you. Problem is, you're not going to be around to be appreciated, but you got to know that's how it works.
Very true. Very true. I want to open the floor to Ashley Ortiz Rosario. Ashley, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, Ashley. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. Thank you so much, Mr. Cockerell, Dan, for being here. I'm an avid fan of your podcast and your father's podcast. And a few of my favorite episodes are when you both give advice to college graduates or college students. And I'm in the midst of launching my own project targeted specifically to high school students. So my question would be, what do you wish educators these days were teaching our kids in high school in terms of college and career prep?
Yeah. It's, it's funny because you're talking to the guy who studied liberal arts. I was studying history and politics, and that's why I started out in the parking lot, because I didn't know much. My son, our oldest son, is a biomed engineer, and he works in Boston. He like his first job, he was getting 4 weeks of vacation and making what I made after 10 years at Disney. So there's an upside to that. But I think there's both two things to this. One is, I think educators need to be focusing in on skills, whether that's STEM topics or just teaching people how to think critically, how to, operate software, how to use tools to be able to deliver value when, kids get out of high school or going to college, get out of college. And then there's the other side of that, which is this soft side, right? This relational side, emotional intelligence, handling stress, handling feedback, building relationships with people. Because if you can get out in the world and have a really good skill and be an expert in something and be able to deal with interpersonal relationships, you're going to be just fine. Even if you have one of those, you're probably going to be okay. It's going to be a little harder, but if you only have technical skills and you don't know how to deal with people, you're going to be in trouble. And if you can only deal with people, but you can't bring any value to the organization directly, that's going to be a problem. So I think it's those two things, and whatever that looks like is very helpful. But I think real world things, applicable things, I'm a huge believer in teaching through doing, having people role play these things, having people do these things, and stepping out of the theoretical and actually having them see it. And that's such a powerful thing. So when they get out of high school or college, they're not walking into an environment that's totally alien to them, because you've been able to prepare them of, this is what a job looks like. And by the way, 30% of your job, if 30% of your job is crappy, you probably still have a great job, because you don't get out and just have every single day be ponies and rainbows. You're gonna have bad days, and you're gonna have parts of your jobs you don't like to do. But you know what? You have to do those parts of your job to do the rest of them, and that's just reality. And I think if you can teach those things in high school, that'll be very helpful to your students.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Dan, before we go to the next question, I just want you to know that people are raving about you right now. So I love the fact that you're blunt with your responses, you're giving direct responses. So we absolutely love it. Thank you. I would like to turn the floor over to Jacqueline. Jacqueline, are you there? Just a second. If not, I'll ask her. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and actually ask her a question on her behalf. So, Jacqueline would like to know, what would you say are the top 3 essential skills in the transition from a senior frontline role to leading others? That's her first question. So we'll answer that one first.
Okay. So this is the part 2 of my book, which is leading teams. And what I put in there, I did not make up. I've read a lot over my career and learned about leadership and learned about management. And I'm a huge fan of the Gallup organization. And if you're not familiar with Gallup, if you've done the Strength Finders 2.0, you've dealt with Gallup. And if you've read Soar with Your Strengths, you've dealt with Gallup. And there's a lot of great books. Buckingham is one of the authors who writes for Gallup. And they had 4 essential things to think about when you're leading a team of people to get the most productivity out of the team. Number 1 was make sure you have the right talent. You have the right people. And when I worked at Disney and in QSR, I worked with Liz Clark, was one of the superstar general managers of food and beverage. And she always had this term at the Cosmic Rays, right? One of the biggest restaurants in the world at Magic Kingdom, aces in their places. So when it was a busy Christmas day, she said, you know what? I know who I want to have on the cash register. I know who I want to have in the filler positions. I know who I want on the fryers. I know who I want to be in the greeter positions. Now the union's going to say everyone's the same and they should have equal and you should rotate them. She's like, no way. I'm going to pick the talent. And I'm going to put it where it's going to be the best at what they do. And that doesn't change with leadership. When you manage people, you got to find out what their passions and talents are and give them those things that they're going to be great at. This whole thing of let's rotate responsibilities so everyone gets to do something, that's a disaster. Hey, you're not organized and you hate doing schedules, so I'm going to give it to you for a year so you can learn it. So make your life miserable and your whole team's life miserable. How about this? How about I train you how to do schedules and I never give them to you because that's not what you're great at. So this idea of helping people lead with their strengths and giving them that as a leader, that's a big part of your job, is assigning the right tasks to the right people. The next 3 things: build strong relationships, set clear expectations for performance, and provide reward and recognition when people do it right. And that was the model. I was always looking, do I have the right people in the jobs? Am I investing enough time in relationships and getting to know people and getting to know how they're feeling about their jobs and making sure that they feel good about this environment? Have I been clear on what I want from them so they know what success looks like? And when they do it well, am I making sure to reinforce that behavior with reward and recognition? And if I could do those 4 things well, I was like 90% successful. Now, doing those things, understanding what those things are and actually doing them are 2 simple things. Don't take simple for easy. Simple concepts, very hard to execute when you're dealing with a lot of people, but very simple, straightforward concepts, I think.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. I'm so sorry. I don't know if my video is going in and out right now, but I wanted to see if we have Dave Patchell. Dave, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Dave, hi. Okay, perfect. Excellent. Dave, I wanted to turn the floor to you and let you present your question to Dan.
Sure. Hello, Dan. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Along with Mindy's question from earlier, basically, what do you recommend as far as setting a timeline for a person entering the workforce and having a certain amount of time they'd be willing to work on the ground floor before advancing? And also, in addition to that, if someone's transitioning in career, should they be willing to start on the ground floor, start all over on the ground floor, or should they hold out for something along with their experience?
Yeah. So I think a couple things there. I think one is how long should you wait? I don't think there is a timeline. I think you can give yourself your internal timeline. Sometimes if you're a certain place in your life, you may have other responsibilities you need to fulfill. When I first got out of college, my only responsibility was like eat and go to work. Like I didn't have a girlfriend, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a car payment. So, there's a lot of things I didn't have to worry about. And as I got older, I had less flexibility. And to tell you the truth, when I was working at Disneyland Paris, I was a frontline manager for 5 years and a job had opened and I thought I was deserving to get promoted and I didn't. And, I didn't hang out there and just say, well, they made a mistake and I'm just going to walk around or complain and wait. My wife and I said, you know what, maybe they're not recognizing our talents. And so let's go make a change. And we moved back to the US and I interviewed with other companies besides Disney. I stayed with Disney, but it was just a personal decision because I thought I was ready to go. And I think I'm a pretty self-aware person. Some people think they're ready and they're not. And that's another issue. You know, are you really ready to make that next move? So you have to know yourself, and you have to decide, is this, they're not recognizing that I have the ability to do this, and is this their problem? Or do I think I'm really better than I really am? And is this my problem? And so you got to make sure and have some people around you who can be very frank and candid with you about their thoughts on that, and be willing to learn the truth there. And I think about this whole idea of stepping back and then stepping back forward again. That's hard. You know, because like I said, as generally as you get older, you get more responsibilities and maybe less flexibility. And so you have to make decisions on whether you're willing to do that or not. I've seen people come to Disney that have walked away from big jobs and a lot of money because for them, those jobs are so stressful. They just wanted to be in a place where they were going to be valued and be able to add value and not, you know, be able to sleep at night. And I've seen people, stockbrokers and insurance people from all over come and work at Disney and started out driving buses and worked their way up. Other people said, look, unless you can hire me as a senior manager or director, I can't come to Disney. I can't take a frontline role. And what I tell them is, then I'm not sure if I can do anything for you, because at Disney, 99% of the people there are promoted from within. And rightly so. When you have 74,000 people working, you probably have the people and the talent internally. You just got to find them. Now, we do take people externally. If we need a conventions manager, you know, before Disney was in the conventions business or in the sports business, or we have to go outside for technology positions, we'll go outside. But generally, when you have that internally, so I've talked to a lot of senior people who said, can you get me in? I said, no, I can. Are you willing to work part-time and work like parades in the Magic Kingdom? They're like, you're kidding, right? I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. And are you willing to? So what I tell people is, they say, well, what would you recommend if I've been working for 20 years and I have a family and these financial responsibilities? And I say, get a time machine, go back in time and start with Disney 20 years ago. So it's, like I said, it's not impossible to get externally into Disney or into a company at the right level. And other companies, they're big on hiring externally. And so that's where you got to find out culturally, where do they get their people from? Disney happens to be internal. A lot of companies will go externally. And if that's where you want to be, then that's what you can do. But it's probably part of it's a practical decision, and part of it's how much faith do you have in your talent and your ability to kind of move up over time. Disney's a great place. It's a big place. And in operations, there's always positions available for good people, because we have there's so much stuff going on there when it's open, right?
Thank you. That's great information.
Sure. Thanks for the question.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave, and it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being on our call today. Well, as for participant questions, that will actually wrap up this portion because we are running out of time. Honestly, we could continue this conversation, so I would love to continue this. We're definitely going to follow up with your questions as well. Honestly, Dan, if we did a second session and we could invite you back to keep this conversation going, I would absolutely love that as well.
Yeah, well, a couple things. One is send me all the questions, and we'll see maybe if we schedule another session. But also, I would love to get questions and maybe tackle these in my podcast, because I'm always looking for content and what people want to hear about. And so I could take some of these questions and we could make them episodes. Jody and I could tackle them on the podcast, and then another session maybe in the cards, so we can go either way there.
Definitely, definitely. I want to leave you with one more question. Of course, your leadership legacy, it's known across the Walt Disney Company and at Walt Disney World. If you were to reflect back at your time at Disney, what do you think your leadership legacy was? What was that legacy that you left behind?
Yeah, I'd like to think the legacy I left behind was respecting everybody I met. You know, I was raised, my parents raised me in a way that we respect everybody. And that's how it was. They role modeled it, and that's what I always learned. And having started at the front line at Disney and working my way up over time, I have a huge respect for people who do any job. And I think there's a hierarchy in America and a lot of countries in the world. Everyone kind of looks at their status and their success based on their level and companies. And I just think so many people measure success on metrics that other people have made up for them. And I'm a big fan of this idea of run your own race. You decide what success looks like. You decide what your goals are, and you decide if you were successful in those goals. And if you weren't successful, well, then get up tomorrow and come back again. And if you feel good about what you've done, then that's up to you. And don't worry about what other people think. Social media has, I think, done such damage on people trying to keep up with the Joneses. And they see that perfect Instagram photo and, man, why isn't my life like that? And those people on Instagram and Facebook, their life isn't like that. Even mine, when I put a nice photo of hiking the mountains or something, you know, I'm probably breathing air. I probably just had an argument with my wife about a project we're working on. I mean, everyone's got problems out there. And I just think treat people with respect and kindness. And I'd like to think that that was something that, you know, I left behind, and hopefully, you know, people can learn from that. And I saw other people do that during my career, and I copied and emulated them. So find the right role models. And if you can do that, you'll leave that legacy also.
Well said, Dan. Thank you again. Thank you so much for your time today. I just want our audience to know that we will follow up. We're going to share the links to Dan's podcast, which is Come Rain or Shine. It's an amazing podcast if you get the opportunity to check that out. We'll also share the links to your book, your website as well, because we definitely want you all to tap into Dan's resources. An amazing leader again. And as I said before, his legacy is absolutely amazing. And people still talk about Dan to this day at Disney. So again, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. I want to thank all of you for your amazing questions. We still have a long list of questions to go through.
Good.
And we'll definitely get those answers for you.
Great. Well, like once again, Brandon, great job to you and the team for setting these up. I think it's fantastic. You're creating these opportunities, and everyone out there who chose to be on here today, that was a choice you made to spend your time. So when you talk to other people who say they never get opportunities, just tell them, hey, they're all at your fingertips. It's up to you. You can make things happen. You just got to expend a little energy.
Exactly.
Good.
Well, Van, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you all again soon. Enjoy the rest of your evening.